Hello, and welcome to Mulligan Stew Podcast, Music, Film, Food, and Wine. My name is Terry David Mulligan. This show will contain wine and music, and a remembrance of a legend. You can find us on Spotify, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. There are 3 shows that exist on our website, mulliganstew.ca. There's Mulligan Stew Radio, which is a weekly show I've been doing for some 24 years on the mighty CKUA network in Alberta, the bravest, greatest music station in this country. There's Tasting Room Radio, which is a food and wine show that I created in a studio in a barn on the Naramata Bench in the Okanagan, which is British Columbia's finest wine region. And there's Mulligan Stew, the podcast. This is our very first 2-part podcast. I was going to do an interview with Gurvinder Bhatia about Interstellar Rodeo. In its 8th year in Edmonton, it does the amazing trick yearly on creating a sensational 3-day music festival. My guest is Gurvinder Bhatia, wine editor for Quench magazine, Global Television's wine contributor, and an international wine judge. Gurvinder pairs wines with each and every one of these artists, and as they come on stage, that wine gets opened and poured in the bar, and the bar is extremely popular. And so, that's happening literally this weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And even if you're not going or you've never been to Edmonton, or at least you can start to think about pairing wine with music. But the most important subject we're going to talk about tonight and today is about a person, not a place or an event. Harry McWatters was the driving force behind British Columbia's wine industry. It is one of the great success stories in Canada, and Harry helped to start it. He was there at the beginning. He had done his 50th vintage, and he had celebrated the first year anniversary of his downtown winery and crush pad in Penticton. He wanted to bring the wine business to where the people were, especially those people that couldn't get to the vineyards. He has won every award conceivable. Harry McWatters died this week in his sleep. He was 74 years of age. What a life. What a huge character. In 2007, I did my first interview with him. I had just started Tasting Room Radio, and he had just swept the Okanagan Wine Awards. In 1980, he started Sumac Ridge, the first estate winery in BC. In 87, he also made the first sparkling wine called Stellar's J, which is still a success today. He started the Okanagan Wine Festival with a group of partners, and he launched the blend called Meritage in British Columbia. He was the founding chair of the BC Wine Institute. He founded BC VQA, founded the BC Hospitality Foundation. He was the director of the BC Vintners Association, the Order of BC, the BC Restaurant Hall of Fame, and we don't have time for the rest of them. His wines currently in the market are Encore, Time, and McWatters. And he was a friend to myself and anybody who came in contact with him. He was that kind of guy. So we begin this first ever 2-part podcast with Harry McWatters in conversation with me over the years, and a commentary from Christine Coletta, who has some of the same qualities as Harry McWatters, only she's Christine Coletta. She is, of course, the co-founder and co-owner of Okanagan Crush Pad and has her fingers on the pulse of the BC wine industry. She was a very good friend to Harry McWatters. It was important to me to get a singular voice talking about the man himself. I've had many conversations with Harry McWatters over the years, and I've tried to take the best of what I heard in each of them. So I may lose the timeline along the way, because the very first interview is the first one I'm going to play for you. From 2007, I had just started Tasting Room Radio, and one of my first very important interviews was with Harry McWatters just after he had won numerous awards at the 2007 Okanagan Wine Festival. This is our salute to one of the great founders of the Canadian wine industry, Harry McWatters. Welcome back to the second hour of the Tasting Room. My name is Terry David Mulligan. We are coming to you from the awards luncheon. Took place Friday at Penticton's Trade and Convention Center. The awards are finally done. I have Harry McWatters with me, who of course is the proprietor and the president and the guy behind Sumac Ridge and See You Later Ranch, which they both did very well, didn't they?
We did very, very well. I actually haven't added up the awards, but...
You've been doing this long enough now. I kind of wonder what the awards mean to you.
You know, how do your wines shape up against the rest of your peers?
Yeah.
From a winemaking team, it's a great opportunity for them to kind of benchmark how are they comparing to the rest, number one. And, you know, sometimes the number of awards aren't the most important thing. As you can appreciate, some of the small wineries that are out there only enter 2 or 3 wines.
Yeah.
Some of us that are a little larger enter a greater number, and so we have a greater opportunity to win more awards. But, you know, when you start bringing home a basket of gold and silver, you know, that's very rewarding that you've got a panel of judges that are considered experts that have judged the wines against the others and lined, and they fared very well. The reality is some of our challenges are not actually having enough of some of these wines to fill the marketplace right now, but we're gradually working our way through the short crop of 04 and 05. So, you know, the whites that we won awards for today are almost exclusively from the 06 vintage. So we have some inventory for a change.
How was 06 compared to what we're having now?
Vintage, you know, that we haven't had a really challenging vintage since the year 1999 in some cases, the 96. So, you know, since the year 2000, you know, we've had variation from one vintage to another. What we've had are challenges on the amount of crop,
right,
not the quality of crop. You know, that hearing comments from some of the judges and that they don't believe that they were over generous. They think they were pretty frugal with metals, and I think that just speaks volumes that these wines are continuing to win awards, not only here and nationally, but you know, as you know, I judge a number of international competition. When British Columbia wines are in the flights, I'm very, very proud, regardless of whose label they are, that Okanagan Valley wines fare extremely well at places like the Los Angeles International Wine Competition, the Pacific Rim International Competition. Next month I'm judging in the Pacific Northwest, and I'm really confident about the wines from this region going there and making people realize that we may be small, but we're a force to be reckoned with as far as the quality of wines in the world.
We may be small, but we're really good in the corners.
Yeah, well, and some of us aren't quite as small as others, but the industry is fairly tiny.
Harry McWatters, Sumac Ridge, and See You Later. Now, you've been watching this grow. You've had a ringside seat, and you've helped make this grow.
Is that a way of saying I'm older than most?
I suppose so, if you wanted to put it in those particular words.
This is my 40th vintage in the business.
Yes.
And you know what? They just get better and better and better. Every vintage that I can celebrate in the future, I'm looking forward to, and hopefully I've got enough energy to hold the glass.
The only guy I know that counts his rings
yes.
for each year. But these awards here tell you that, again, you're on the right track, that people like what you do.
Yeah, and you know what? What's really important here is if you look at the number of awards that went to the number of wineries, that the rising tide is lifting an awful lot of ships.
Harry McWatters, Sumac Ridge, and See You Later. You know, I know that when you set out, you may have wanted to be a world beater, but you could never have imagined how large this has become.
No, you know, you have to readjust your goalposts all the time. The reality is that I had a dream for what we could do as a winery. I had a dream for what we could do as an industry. As the founding chairman of this wine festival, that I had great expectations. Well, you know what, we blew past those expectations so many years ago that every year we've had to reassess you know, where those goalposts are. When we started this wine festival, 7 wineries participated.
7. And this year, did you see a head count?
You know what, I can't count that high.
We're on the right track. Okay, that's good.
We're on the right track. Things are looking very good, and I just see a brighter and brighter future for the industry.
And how do we do it better?
Keep pushing the envelope. Strive for pushing the envelope on new varieties, new qualities, flavor, and hopefully the customers continue to support us so we can do all those things.
Can we make more?
yes, we can make more.
It's not just BC and Alberta that's drinking our wine?
Well, you know what? I don't care who drinks it as long as we're doing the best we can.
You don't care if Eastern Canada?
You know what? They can come here and buy them and take them home.
Can you sell in the States? Have you got enough to
sell? Well, we've actually pulled out of the States. We sold 1,000 cases of wine from our winery last year in Washington State, and we've had to pull out because we couldn't supply. 2 years ago, we sold 11,000 cases in Ontario and Quebec. We can't supply it. Now, we've grown, but our consumers are at our door, and you know what? We've got to take care of the people in our backyard first.
Harry McWatters, Sumac Ridge, and see you later. Who catches your eye on this list of wineries? Some of these wineries we're seeing for the first time. Who?
Well, I'll tell you this, some bright lights there that I saw from some of the smaller wineries at Golden Mile. I have a huge regard for Michael Bartier and his ability to make wine. Township 7, I think I've heard certainly in the gold and silver category is under new ownership, and that's really good that we see some that have been around for a while but are small family operations like Wild Goose, and I'm going to miss a whole bunch, but those just off the top of my head, there's 3 family operated businesses, small wineries that I think are just doing a phenomenal job. And for those of us that are a little larger in scope, we really need those others with that passion to help grow the image and awareness of what's happening in the British Columbia wine industry.
And of course, we the consumer, who I like to think I represent in some
Me
small
too.
way.
I'm a fairly aggressive consumer. Actually.
Yes, you are. I'm waiting for that wine store to open. They vote with their wallets, hard-earned dough.
They sure do. And it's, what we have to always be conscious of is that don't let our success go to our head. It's really about making sure we can deliver not only the right amount of wine, we have to continue to push ourselves to deliver value at every price point.
Did I ask you, when you were on the show and you kindly stayed for the whole 2 hours and brought your Stellar's J with you, God bless you.
I brought some today too. You might have missed out on it.
Yeah, I did, yeah. What would you say to all of those wineries who don't submit their wines for tasting and don't take part in this?
I think they're missing out on something. I really do. That but people, it's about individual choices, and I think those that do understand the value, and those that don't yet understand the value.
Harry McWatters, who is Sumac Ridge, and see you later. Congratulations on all your wins today.
Thank you, Terry, very much. Good luck with your show. It's I'm getting really good comments and feedback back from what you're doing.
Thank you.
Keep it up.
We are remembering Harry McWatters. Through his own words, we lost Harry McWatters this week, 74 years young. A builder, a true builder who gave everything he had to the industry and to British Columbia and the country that he loved. 6 years after the last interview, Harry and I hooked up when he was pouring his new wines at Bricks in downtown Vancouver. So, Harry McWatters from a couple of years ago. Here's Harry McWatters, and he is a welcome guest on Tasting Room Radio. This show started its life 6 years ago in the Okanagan. Harry McWatters calls the Okanagan his backyard. Welcome back to the show. As part of the Time Estate Winery story, you talk about a moment when you bought a piece of land and a certain stretch of road. Where was the piece of land? Why did you buy it? And at what cost?
Okay, the stretch of land is on the Black Sage Road. In fact, the vineyard was originally called the Black Sage Vineyard when we planted it. Why there? Well, it's a very unique piece of real estate. We get more light intensity than any viticultural region in the world. We get more heat units than places like Napa or Sonoma. We get more hours of sunlight than any place in North America, and we're in a rain shadow. So this vineyard has a history of the average rainfall over the last 30 years is less than 6 inches per annum. So when we get all of those things combined, it really is a very magical place. We're in very light soil. It's described as sandy loam, but I call it the beach, and it's 300 feet deep of sand. So we actually get to control the nutrient, the moisture, and it's a perfect place for growing Bordeaux varieties. And we had that bias when we bought it and planted it. And when you talk about buying it, initially the land was for sale for $2,250 an acre, and I offered them $1,850, and they didn't even counter it. So, wait, they'll come around. So almost 2 years later, it was $4,000, and we managed to negotiate at $3,750 an acre. Today, you can't buy anything on that bench for growing grapes for raw land for less than probably $110,000 an acre, and they're selling for up to $200,000 producing.
He's Harry McWatters. He is releasing his new wines called Time Estate Winery. There is a white meritage, a red meritage, and a smashing Chardonnay that you want to keep an eye out for. Were you surprised that the name was available?
I was surprised, but
I was shocked.
I'm actually very pleased that it was available. We're having a lot of fun with it, as you know. I think that they realize that time today is really very much our currency, and these wines are about time and place.
Well, there's a whole thought process when you look on your labels, and you've time-stamped it 2011, 2012. That's a moment in time.
It is a moment in time. We're going to put a time capsule, or several time capsules built into the winery. And we think that it's really important to reflect on the time that's passed, but it's more important to look forward to the time spent with friends and family and great occasions to come.
Harry McWatters, Tasting Room Radio at Bricks, and it's the release of the first tastings of Time Estate Winery. The whites came from the Sundial?
All of the grapes that all the wines we've made are 100%.
What is it, Black Sage? Or
it's called the Sundial Vineyard. And when we named it the Sundial Vineyard, it was because we knew that time was just around the corner. And all of the wines we have produced to date, and in the near future will be estate bottled. And
your ace in the hole is that your guy in the vineyard is Richard Cleave.
He's actually pretty good. He's starting to know what he's doing. And I got to have the utmost respect for what he does. He's planted more grapes in this country than anybody else. And I can't think of anybody I'd sooner rely on to produce the best grapes possible so we can make great wine.
So there's a $25 white meritage, 275 cases. Is a blend. Well, I'll let you tell me the blend.
The blend of the white meritage is 79% Sauvignon Blanc and 21% Semillon, classic Bordeaux varieties. The red meritage, it's 60% Merlot, 25% Cabernet Sauvignon, and 15% Cabernet Franc. Again, a combination of French and American oak. These wines were aged for a year in barrels.
Time Estate Winery, a new old player in the game, Harry McWatters.
Long time.
But you have to know, if you chase wine, if you want to know about wines, the names of Harry McWatters and Richard Cleave combined together make all of these wines a slam dunk. Last question, Harry. The wine business in Canada, the shipping of wine from province to province, like a real country. How are we doing on that?
Well, we're getting there, and large thanks to you for bringing it to the fore in a lot of people's minds. There's still a lot of places where the provinces are saying that they won't accept that, but it's certainly been said that I don't know anybody that's ever been charged, and I think that our attitude is if somebody asks us to ship it, we're going to go ahead and ship it.
I'm seeing a lot more people just standing up and saying, we're in the shipping business, we're in the wine business. If they want to come and get us, come and get us.
I've said this more than once, but maybe it'll take wine to unite this country.
Congratulations, and just carry on doing what you're doing.
Thank you. Appreciate you coming.
Harry McWatters, who is the voice and the face of British Columbia and Canadian wines. We're here at Bricks for the release of Time Estate Winery. This is Tasting Room Radio. I'm Terry David Mulligan. The card says Vintage Consulting Group, Harry McWatters, and then President. Is that you?
That's me.
We're at Local Lounge and Grill in Summerland. Harry McWatters is our special guest, and we're here for quite a tasting. But let's go back for just a second, Harry, because let's go back. When you left the business, you didn't really leave the business. You just left the day-to-day operations of Sumac and all that implies, and you started your own Vintage Consulting Group. Tell us about that business and those couple of years.
Okay, well, certainly the transition. For those that don't know, that I started Sumac Ridge. We opened 30 years ago on the 11th of July. So, we've had a wonderful run. When I sold the business, which was actually 5 companies, to Vincor, it included Sumac Ridge, See You Later Ranch, Black Sage Vineyard, Okanagan Estate Distributors, and Custom Estate Bottlers, so 5 companies. So I still owned controlling interests actually in the Black Sage Vineyard, so we did a subdivision of that we have 60 acres there, and as officially we have now changed the name to the Sundial Vineyard, and that'll make a lot more sense as we go forward. as far as why we named it that. But Sundial Vineyard is a very special place. It has garnered more awards than any other vineyard in the country. And so I never really left, other than, as you say, the day-to-day operations at Sumac Ridge. I finished 2008 at the last day of April, and on the first day of May I was on a plane to the Winnipeg Wine Festival, and I've now consult for more than 20 wineries, different projects from Vancouver Island to Nova Scotia to the Mexican border, and I've had a really interesting few years. But all along I was planning to do something in the wine business. So in 2007 we actually kept a small amount of fruit, produced a small quantity of 3 varieties that originated from Bordeaux, all from the Black Sage bench, and we produced the first, what we're going to release officially today, McWatters Meritage. And so that whole concept came from thinking that I want to still keep my finger in the business, but you may or may not be aware that I actually was responsible for bringing the term Meritage to Canada, making it international. We did that in 1993. And I've always believed that by taking the old world tradition of blending, particularly with Bordeaux varieties, that if you do it properly, it should be a reflection of either your individual philosophy and or the vintage or the origin of the fruit. And it really is, wine is about place. So once we've determined place, it was really what components would be best suited to bring together a wine where each of the individual components has a very interesting characteristic, but when we bring them together in the right proportions, clearly the end result should be greater than the sum of the parts.
He's Harry McWatters. He has a brand new wine out in the market. It's a Meritage, McWatters Meritage. We're local in Summerland. All right, there's a lot to chew on there. First of all, the Black Sage Vineyard. The Black Sage Vineyard is legend. In my mind, it's the one. That is sort of ground zero for me in terms of Okanagan winemaking, because it's it's what you cleave. It's just that area, right?
Absolutely, and that, Dick has been farming the vineyard for us. Well, he was responsible for making sure we identified it. When we bought the property in 1992, Dick planted over 100 acres there mechanically in 20 days in 1993. That was the largest planting ever to happen in Canada to that point. Now, others have planted more in the same year since then, but Dick has been responsible for all the viticultural program on that dirt since the day we acquired it, and I have total confidence in him. In fact, people say to Dick, so how much intervention do you get? That clearly his direction has always been, you make every decision you think you need to, as long as you're making it in favor of quality.
He's Harry McWatters. We're local in Summerland. This is one of the bonuses of actually following the wine business, Harry, because I believe in you, and I absolutely believe in Dick Cleave, and I believe in that plot of land. So anything that comes from that area, I'm going to be interested in. It's going to be special, and so we've come to this day.
Exactly, and I can tell you, when we put the wine together, the individual components, we started working on the blend, clearly I had a different concept in mind than ever calling it McWatters. My kids intervened, that they had tasted it, and they came to me collectively and said, Dad, by the time we had a little chat here, said, why don't you call it McWatters? I said, I have a problem doing that. And they said, well, the reason you said you were doing this was as a legacy. And we were actually looking at calling it legacy. That name has been used a little bit overused. But clearly it was about a legacy for my kids who have grown up in the business. That Crystal Lee made her first wine when she was 9 years old, and Darren still works in the wine business and has planted a small vineyard. They're very involved. And so this is really about the opportunity going forward. As they said, Dad, we may have to remind you this, but it's actually our name too. And so this is really about legacy. And Crystal Lee said, as a retailer and a restaurateur, there is actually some name recognition. I said, well, there's probably some people that won't buy it because it says that.
Harry McWatters is with me, and we're talking about his McWatters Meritage that comes from the Black Sage Road, now the Sundial Vineyard. Is this just the tip of the iceberg, Harry?
Well, life evolves, and I have some plans in the works that we're working on. We're flirting with the idea of building another winery, and certainly time will tell whether we do that or not. That I will make up my mind clearly one way or the other before the end of this calendar year.
So as you're the lead actor and this is your opening night, do you have any butterflies, any nervousness? You're wondering what people will think?
A few butterflies, but I'm thinking that if I have a glass of wine, then those will settle right down. Of course, when you create something, you're always concerned about what other people think. And, whether it's a chef preparing a meal for you or a winery preparing a wine for you, that they want to hear good things about it. And, and the nice thing is people are always afraid to tell you when they don't like it to your face. They'll tell other people. I actually welcome it. People don't like this particular wine. I want to hear that from them. And I'd like to hear what their style is, because I'll gladly recommend something else for them.
Why a Meritage, Harry? You had your choice of...
I was the guy that was responsible for bringing Meritage to Canada, and the whole philosophy of Meritage, it started in 1988. It was a group of California winemakers that worked together that were producing big blended wines, this style, things like Insignia and Trilogy, and they were all marketing their individual proprietary brands and said, you know what, we need to band together and talk about this philosophy. And I was very excited about what they were doing. I had followed them. A very good friend of mine was their executive director of their newly formed association. We approached them. They actually turned us down the first time and said, no, by definition, it's an American wine. And this guy's name was Rick. I said, so Rick, do you have a map there? And he says, I do. And I said, you see the big pink part above United States that you think it was Canada? I bet if you look in there, it says North, somewhere right above America. And I said, we're actually part of North America, and I believe in the philosophy. And one of the things we can do is that my colleagues we've chatted about it, that we can bring it to Canada. We can write it into our VQA standards. So in Canada, you can only make Meritage if it's VQA.
He's Harry McWatters, McWatters Meritage. We're local in Summerland. State of the business these days, Canadian, Okanagan, what's your gut instinct?
My gut instinct, it's going to continue to grow. When I reflect back, Sumac Ridge was the first true estate winery in Canada, producing now wines for over 30 years. They were exclusively from grapes grown literally in their backyard. People thought we were crazy when we started to do that. When you look today, we were the first estate winery. Today, somebody told me yesterday there are 208 wineries in British Columbia. We're now at 11,000 acres of grapes being cultivated in British Columbia. Looking forward, I know with clients that I'm working with, there are more to come in both acres and wineries. I think what that does is that we must think that the guy down the street or a few miles down the road isn't our competition. The competition comes from another country, and they're as close as your closest retailer. So we must always be conscious. Let's deliver value at every price point.
And finally, and it's my favorite subject, obviously, and that is the 1928 Importation of Illegal Liquors Act from Prohibition.
I'm glad to see that you managed to commit, I think, a felony without getting caught. This is an old Prohibition throwback. I can understand every province wanting to protect their own backyard. However, I think that what we have to think about is that as Canadians, that's what we are first. We may be British Columbians first, but the reality is we've got Canadian consumers would like to buy British Columbia wines. I think there's even some people in Alberta that would buy Ontario wines. Yep. Having said that, if we're talking about wines that are 100% Canadian grown, it's just good for Canadian agriculture and for Canadians to discover. We go to some provinces and we watch foreign producers from many countries outselling Canadian product radically. Fortunately, that's not the case in British Columbia. I don't believe that there's a huge economic upside or downside to anybody, but there's certainly an attitude that if we could, for a small producer, if they could sell an extra 50 or 60 cases a year, that has an economic impact. For a major winery, that actually would probably be an inconvenience. It would be a service to their customer. It's not going to make any difference to them economically.
It's nice to have you back in the winemaking business.
Well, I didn't think I actually really left.
Well, you didn't. No, I understand. No, you didn't retire, but I mean, you're back in the juice business.
Yeah, and I never really got very far away from it. I just got a little bit quiet about it for a while, and some people were really happy to see me quiet for a little while.
Thank you for your wine.
Thank you. I hope you enjoy it.
And congratulations on Sumac's 30th.
Thank you. That was a great milestone for all the people that worked there over the years. It's tough to go to wineries throughout the valley, or I talk to people and they say, well, do you know so-and-so? And I said, well, sure, they work for us. And they said, we don't have to have a conversation for very long to find out that there was an awful lot of folks that worked with you at one point or another over the last 30 or 40 years.
Harry McWatters, the president of Vintage Consulting and his own winery now, McWatters. At Local in Summerland, I'm Terry David Mulligan. This is Tasting Room Radio.
As you followed the timeline of those Harry McWatters interviews, you can see we started in 2007, and then there was 9 and 11 and 13 and on up. And for 12 years, we've been interviewing Harry and Christine Coletta, side by each in some cases, because they seem to go hand in glove. And I have Christine Coletta on the line because, Christine, if you don't mind, Harry's place in the world of Canadian wine and BC wines could use an outside voice besides Harry's or mine. And because you are the co-owner and co-founder of Okanagan Crush Pad Winery in Summerland, he was a great friend of yours, was he not?
He certainly was, yes. I met Harry back in the 80s when I was working in the restaurant industry, and he had such a compelling sales pitch. It was hard to say no to Harry, and I've learned over the years that was a signature of Harry's, is making sure that he always got a yes.
Somebody made a comment today on the internet about one of Harry's great qualities was that he made room for other voices and other people. He would share what he knew with other people.
Very much so. He was a real team player, and if you look back on the history of VQA, it wasn't Harry alone that drove the initiative. There were a large group of people, but Harry was the glue. He was the component that brought everyone together. It
was a bit of a bulldog. He wouldn't let it go, would he?
He definitely wouldn't. I remember one famous dinner where government was proposing changes to policy, and it would have really devastated the industry. Harry got up from the table mid-entree and threw his keys across the table to a deputy minister and walked out the door. And as he was leaving, he said, "You might as well take the keys to the winery now, because what you're proposing will be the end of me."
Huh.
And we all got up from the table, and we marched out the door behind Harry. And the beautiful part of that was that we left the government with the bill for dinner. So I always remember that fondly, and it was very signature Harry to just, take a very firm position and grandstand a little in order to get his point across.
Christine Coletta is on the line from Okanagan Crush Pad, co-founder, co-owner, and a good friend of Harry McWatters, who we are remembering today. Well, always, frankly. Hard to say what the legacy will be. I mean, there's so many, Sumac Ridge, First Estate Winery, First Sparkling Wines, Stellar's J, started in partnership with others, Okanagan Wine Festival, his whole, like a dog grabbing a bone to create Meritage Wines in British Columbia, in Canada. Founding chair of the BC Wine Institute, BC VQA, Hospitality Foundation. It goes on and on and on. So what is that? Is that a combined legacy?
Yes. I mean, there's so many other smaller achievements that Harry had along the way that, just sort of get put into the shadows with some of the big picture and big ticket items that he worked on. Little things like supporting other people and helping people get into the business. And the time he spent with people. I said it the other day, as the founding chair of the Wine Institute, I could call Harry at 5:00 in the morning and get him on the phone, and we would talk for hours. And he would say to me, "You're never a bother. Call me anytime." He said, I'm here for you. And he would always end up those conversations where I was asking him for his advice. He would say, "Well, what do you want to do? What would you do?" And when I told him, he said, "Well, then I think that's what you should do." And his famous line to me was, 85% of the time you'll be right, and the other 15 you'll be forgiven for. So he was, in essence, giving me license to try things, make the odd mistake along the way. But he told me on all fronts he had confidence in me.
Christine Coletta is on the line from Okanagan Crush Pad, co-founder, co-owner, and a good friend of Harry McWatters. Christine, do you have any thoughts on how we remember Harry McWatters for future generations? How do we remember him? Is there something we can name?
Oh, I think there's people putting their heads together right now. I've had so many emails already trying to determine what would be the appropriate legacy for Harry. Obviously, the family needs to be involved in that decision, but I know we'll come up with something monumental, definitely.
The one place that a lot of people are going to go through and and meet and say goodbye to people as they come and go from the Okanagan would be the airport. And I thought the Harry McWatters Airport would be kind of cool.
Well, Harry was very well known at the Penticton Airport. He was a regular on the earliest flight out, of course, and the last flight in. And the staff all know Harry very well. And I think that might be something that we can work on.
He's everywhere, frankly, in the valley, isn't he?
Yes, and I think Harry had a vision for an urban winery, which has now come into establishment as Time, a winery and kitchen in downtown Penticton. Mm-hmm. And I think he really wanted to strike new territory, and he certainly did it. The winery just celebrated their first anniversary. They're making beautiful, delicious wines, both under that label, the McWatters label, and also their sister winery, Evolve. So, as always, Harry is always looking forward. And typically, when you're that person that's out forging new territory and innovating, you're working harder than the rest of us that follow. And so I think he's on to something in terms of the urban setting for a winery. If you think about all of us setting up our industrial plants on beautiful agricultural land, it really doesn't make sense. Yep. And so the next step for all of us is to take that urban winery model and do what they've done in other regions and get off ALR land and go where the people are, which is what Harry's done with this initiative.
Like a Woodinville principle?
Exactly, yes. And so I think he could see that. And he got top dollar for the vineyard. And he's taken that and he's reinvested in a different model, which I think a lot of us are going to find that we follow that model.
Christine Collette is on the line from Okanagan Crush Pad and a good friend of Harry McWatters. If we ever get around to being smart enough and clever enough and everybody signs off on it, that we have our own Woodinville just outside Vancouver, because many people who come to the West Coast will never get to the Okanagan. But if you could bring the Okanagan to them, that also, I think, should be considered as a McWatters tribute site.
Well, exactly. And there was a push at one point through the YAP report to allow wineries to have a secondary location, because that is common in other areas.
Right.
And if we could all set up in an area that had close proximity to Vancouver. I was at the Vancouver airport yesterday, and my goodness, the people rolling into Vancouver.
Yep.
Tourism is at an all-time high in the triangle of Victoria, Vancouver, and Whistler. If we can capture some of that as a wine industry, that would be a wonderful thing.
And if every one of those cruise ships that came into the harbor made available as an option, rather than going downtown and shopping, going on a wine trip just outside of the city itself, they'd go by the busload.
They certainly would. And we've seen that model work elsewhere, and it certainly could work here. We just need somebody to champion it. And I think, people like Harry come along once in a lifetime. And Harry wasn't afraid to take on big issues like that and drive it forward. And we need to find our new Harry that's going to help us drive innovation for our industry.
Could a Harry be a Harriet?
Perhaps.
Okay.
Maybe. Yes, definitely. And, it's interesting because someone asked me recently, what were there any issues in the wine industry about gender and equity and equality? And I said, I think because our industry started as family-run businesses involving husbands, wives, daughters, and sons, there never has been sort of a hierarchy of it being a male-dominated industry. So you're right. It could very well be a Harriet.
Christine Coletta on the line from Okanagan Crush Pad. Last question, Christine, and that is, Harry, in the interviews that we've just finished running, talked all the time about his legacy. And I know he was thinking about his family and leaving the McWatters brand to his family. That's a given. Was there anything else that we can call his legacy?
Well, I think obviously the fact that the wine industry is 250 wineries strong today is in part due to Harry's efforts. Working with other people like George and Trudy Heiss, Adolf Kruger, there was a huge group of people, the Stewart family, that really sort of drove a new vision for BC wine. And Harry was always leading that pack. So I think that for all of us, I think any of us that own a winery, we can thank Harry, because if he hadn't done all that heavy lifting back in the day, I don't know that we'd be here. I know I certainly wouldn't have had the gumption to do what I did at my age if it hadn't been for Harry being behind me saying, you can do this.
Thank you, Christine Coletta. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Harry.
Big thanks to Harry.
The second part of this show is about Interstellar Rodeo. Gurvinder Bhatia. Interstellar Rodeo is a gathering of musicians and artists in Edmonton, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Our guest on this podcast is Gurvinder Bhatia, who is Quench Magazine's wine editor. He's Global Television's wine columnist and international wine judge. He's a specialist in Italian wines. Please enjoy on Mulligan Stew, the podcast. We have saluted Harry McWatters. He loved the idea of wines being paired with artists, with bands on stages, and film, for that matter. This is the 8th year of the Interstellar Rodeo in Edmonton. It's this weekend now. We've already missed a day. And I have Gurvinder Bhatia. He's the wine editor at Quench Magazine, Global Television wine columnist, and an international wine judge, specialist in Italian wines. Gurvinder, so first of all, welcome to the podcast and welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Terry.
A word about Harry, if you will. He had a huge effect. I mean, yes, you are one province removed, but you couldn't help but cross paths with Harry.
Oh my God! I mean, I have had the good fortune of spending a lot of time with Harry over the past 25 years that I've been in this industry, and you know, Harry, he really is. I mean, sometimes the word gets overused, but he really was a pioneer, and the modern Canadian industry wouldn't have evolved the way it did, I don't think, without people like Harry. And he was such a warm guy, and just sitting around a table and sharing stories with Harry and was just so entertaining. And you know, it's a huge loss for the industry and for everybody who's associated with the Canadian industry, because it's not just the BC industry that he influenced. I mean, he really influenced the entire Canadian industry.
He did that. Right. Let's get on with the event that you have right underneath your nose. You've been working on this for at least for the last time since we talked about this. It's an amazing music festival called Interstellar Rodeo. I was going to ask you before we start talking about the bands and the wine, Gurvinder, what's the median age? What's the audience for Interstellar?
You know, the great thing about Interstellar, it really draws in from all age groups. I mean, you have young families with their kids, the older generation there. You have the 30-something-year-olds. In the 8 years that this festival has been going on now, I don't think there's a single act in there that I've gone, these guys are okay. I mean, this is what she has the ability to do, is bring together this incredible range of music that appeals to just such a broad range of people, and a lot of acts that are new to a lot of people. So she really kind of bridges that familiar with the new, with the different styles, and I think that's one of the great things about this festival.
Because we missed Friday, just take us quickly through the Friday, starting with Weaves.
So Weaves, we paired Weaves with the A&D Monologa Arinto from Portugal. And the thing with Weaves is I find that they really defy labeling. I mean, they're just vibrant and eclectic, and they really transcend any kind of real genre. And the great thing about the Avinto which is a Vino Verde, I mean, it's just got this nervy acidity and racy minerality, and it's unconventional, energetic. So I just thought, the two of them just go so well together, and they really rock your perceptions of what modern really is.
Sharon Van Etten.
Sharon, I just love listening to Sharon. I mean, she's this viscerally candid storyteller, and paired Sharon with the Fonsalade F from Languedoc, which is a Grenache Syrah blend, and it's dark, and it's got depth and complexity, just like Sharon does. Just this, spicy attack and torrid restraint.
Aloe Black.
Aloe, Aloe is one of these guys that everybody knows his music, even though sometimes they don't know it's him. And paired him with the winery of Good Hope Mountainside Syrah from Stellenbosch, South Africa, and the Syrah is just this fresh and engaging and racy and persistent. And with Aloe, I mean, I tell you what, I mean, he is, I think, just exudes cool. And so here you have the combination of the substantive and elegant, and Aloe and the Syrah, I think, are just both have this great personalities.
Gurvinder Bhatia, he's the wine editor at Quench Magazine, global television wine columnist, and an international wine judge, the one you want to call in Alberta, in Edmonton, and across Canada. We're talking about the 8th annual Interstellar Rodeo. Now, today has already launched. Major Love, Zaki Ibrahim, Kanan, I believe, have already been on stage. So just give us a brief description, if you will, about those three acts and the wines you paired them with.
Absolutely. Major Love paired with the Pierce Freedom Sanso Syrah. And the great thing about both is they're both collaborations. And so, whenever you have a collaboration, it's something that you're looking for synergy. You're looking for something that turns out better than the individual parts. And I think, you have the Pierce Freedom Sanso Syrah, which is two guys from Ontario that are in the industry and wanted to create these wines that are just so fresh and so delicious and just such great restaurant wines. And then you have Major Love with Colleen Brown, whose pipes are just, I mean, so melodic and just this purity to her voice. And you get this seamless, synergistic collaboration in both situations.
I don't think anybody's going to slow down Colleen Brown. Nobody, not even herself. Zaki Ibrahim.
With Zaki Ibrahim, I paired with the Winery of Good Hope, Bushvine Chenin Blanc from Stellenbosch. And Zaki, I mean, just such an expressive style all her own, and the Winery of Good Hope really has this unique approach, and they really talk about the fact that they do a different way of thinking and being and doing, and the Chenin is so versatile in and of itself, and so you really have a wine and an artist that are creating art that really is a reflection of their true selves.
Hey, Gurvinder, it would, without passing up on the opportunity, when you hear the two words bush vine, my heart starts to race because and would take a special to talk about bush vines. But when you see the words bush vines, it implies they've been around a long time.
Exactly.
And they look stumpy. As a matter of fact, in the winter, they look dead. But then they magically come alive, and wow, do they ever give you great wine.
Absolutely. I mean, just the quality of the fruit coming off these vines is just incredible.
Kanan,
I mean, here you have these cross-cultural sounds, and Kanan is, basically a beat poet turned rapping philosopher, and really embodies that notion that music tells a story of the people, place, culture, and history. And to me, wine's the same thing. And we paired with the Fonsalade, the Petit Bonheur Viognier from Languedoc. And here's a winery with such a long history and, sustainable practices. And I find both have this intellectual and emotional appeal.
We are matching bands and wines with Gurvinder Bhatia in Edmonton. This is I can't think of another event that does this near as well, because he knows his wines and he knows his bands. For example, in a couple of minutes' time, Rheostatics take the stage, and you've got a Quail's Gate Rosé from the Okanagan.
Absolutely, and here, Canadian pioneers on both the music and the wine side, and exploring new frontiers, but they're still embodied and firmly rooted in the Canadian spirit. And I think they're creating music. Rheostatics are creating music, and the Stewart family at Quail's Gate are creating wines that really we can all be proud to call Canadian. Yet the message really extends beyond our borders, but often it's just kind of for those people who are kind of in the know, so they still kind of fly a little under the radar outside of our borders.
Perfume Genius. I know that you took time to make this choice because that is a very complex artist.
Oh God, absolutely. And listening to Perfume Genius, the music was really, it's entrancing, it's symphonic, just these really expressive sound ranges from the Rubenesque and decadent to a little bit lonely and visceral, and paired with the Madonna della Grazia Alianico from Basilicata in Italy, and I'm such a huge fan of the Alianico grape, and it's energetic and it's vibrant and it's got this beautiful perfumed character to it and this invigorating electric flair. And I find that they just both lure you in with their intensity. And I think it's important that we don't try to attach some arbitrary label to their respective styles.
Hey, Gurvinder, here's the pairing that I thought you nailed it. This is an absolute sweet spot. Sheila E., the headliner tonight, Sheila E. and Lambrusco.
Absolutely. And really, I mean, what do you pair with a rhythm and soul music icon? And Sheila E. and Kalito Chiarli, they've been really doing it for so long, and they both really have their own style. Sheila E., R&B, pop, Latin jazz, funk, unbelievable percussion. And you need a wine that has this explosive character to it, and I don't think anything would work better than the bold red bubbles of the Lambrusco Grasparosa, because it's got this, this vibrant, powerful, soulful edge to it, and just a little bit raw. I just think, it's what better way than to get up and dance and pop the cork with a great red bubbly and just celebrate with Sheila E.
He is Gurvinder Bhatia, and he is the wine editor for Quench Magazine, Global Television's wine columnist, and an international wine judge. He's in Edmonton. He's talking about the 8th, I heard that page turn, you're getting ready for Sunday. This is the 8th annual Interstellar Rodeo, and they're at the Heritage Amphitheater at Harlech Park in Edmonton. Now, if you can't get there tonight, how about Sunday? And they start the day with Southern Avenue.
And I encourage everybody who's coming out on Sunday, get there early. Do not miss Southern Avenue. They're one of the bands that I'm so looking forward to. They're just so energetic and invigorating, and they've got this great fusing soul, blues, roots, R&B, gospel kind of sound, and pairing them with the Philips Muley Steelhang Riesling Halbtrocken from the Mittelrhein in Germany. And, whatever people think about Riesling is still the juice for the cool kids. Yeah. And, it just got so much electricity to it, and it's just soulful and just has this beautiful depth. To me, I mean, the liveliness of the band and the liveliness of the wine are just a perfect match.
I'm thinking Southern Avenue. I'm thinking, ribs. Nothing better than Riesling and ribs.
Absolutely.
You got to get it right, though. That's fantastic. What time do they go on stage?
I believe they go on at 1.
Okay, Riesling at 1. Fine, good. Saul Williams.
So I tell you what, listening to Saul, I think he's going to be one of these people on stage where it's early in the day and people are going to go, oh my God, he's going to wake everybody up because here's a rapper, singer, songwriter, writer, actor, musician, slam poet, and his delivery, it's just this fierce delivery and just this manic sense of urgency to him. And to me, I needed something to pair with him that was complex and edgy and not subtle. And so paired him with the Colinas de Uruguay, Tanat from Uruguay.
A Tanat.
Oh, yeah, just has this, complexity and depth and, this jagged intensity.
Lucius,
with the A&D, leave Vino Verde from Portugal. And, again, you listen to Lucius and just these expansive and seamless harmonies of Jess and Holly together. I mean, they're just captivating, and it's amazing when you take two things and put them together and you go, oh my God, they become inseparable. And same with the Vino Verde. I mean, this is a blend of Arinto and Avesso. And these two grapes together they really become inseparable as one. And so I think both of them really work together.
Okay, Gurvinder, I'm going to step out of the way and let you take a run at because Sunday night is phenomenal. Asleep at the Wheel, White Horse, and Nathaniel Rateliff and the Night Sweats. Have at her.
So Asleep at the Wheel, we're doing with the D'Angelo's Rosato from Marca, Italy. And, Asleep at the Wheel has been around for such a long time, and they're making music that really stands the test of time. And I really think you needed a wine that has this, minerality and freshness. And that's what this rosé really is. It's perfect wine for any occasion. And, neither D'Angelo's, the producer, nor Asleep at the Wheel, they've been doing everything they've been for so long, and neither of them is resting on their laurels. They both just love the party and just want to get things going. So I think they work too well together. With White Horse, we have the Anvers Sauvignon Blanc Bravo, and again, with White Horse, you have a collaboration. You have a husband and wife team, and Melissa and Luke are so incredibly talented on their own. But when you hear them together, you really can't imagine them apart. And similarly, Anvers is a husband and wife team, Wayne and Miriam Keegan from Adelaide Hills in Australia. And I find that the music and the wine, they're just this perfect balance between energetic and elegance. And actually, we did this same pairing when White Horse played Interstellar years ago. Yeah. And so it just worked so well. We thought, hey, let's do it again. They're back. Let's do the pairing again. And finishing off Interstellar, I really can't think of a better way with Nathaniel Rateliff and the Night Sweats. Just such an unbelievable, energetic, raucous, explosive roots band, and they're really going to get people to get up and move. And so you need a wine that has this juicy freshness to it and the wild bursting blueberry flavors and this chuggability. And so we paired the Donna Oridio Syrah from Spain.
Yummy.
And
Yummy.
It's going to just get you to rise up and, just have this energy and soulfulness and this fun. And really, what a great way to end the festival than, raising a glass and quaff the glue to one of the hardest working bands on the circuit.
And what if you can't make a decision? There's a house white and a house red, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So for the house white, we have the Saget La Petite Perrière Sauvignon Blanc from the Loire Valley, which is just so bright and fresh. And hopefully we have nice warm days for the entire weekend. It's been okay so far. And then the house red is the Navarro Lopez Old Vines Tempranillo from Spain, which is, I think, one of the best value wines available. And it just goes to show you that, you don't have to compromise on quality, even at the inexpensive, lower price level. And so that's the part of the thing about this festival is that, there's no compromise on quality in any aspect of it.
Well done, well chosen, well researched, and thank you for your time and for speeding through this. Gurvinder Bhatia, the Quench Magazine wine editor, global television wine columnist, and international wine judge, and the guy who pairs wines with bands at Interstellar Rodeo, year 8. He's been doing it for quite a while. He's really good at it. Have yourself a great weekend, Gurvinder.
Thanks so much, Harry.
Cheers to Harry.
Absolutely.
This is Mulligan Stew, the podcast, and I guess now you've come to realize, if you missed the introduction to the podcast, that we had 2 stories there. We've remembered Harry McWatters, who helped to build a very successful BC wine industry, and frankly, the Canadian wine industry. I thank Christine Coletta for stepping up. And finally, Gurvinder Bhatia for telling us about the music and wine pairing at this weekend's Interstellar Rodeo in Edmonton at Harlick Park. Thank you for listening. This is Mulligan Stew, the podcast.